9 people, mostly civilians, are killed in 2 suicide bombings in the city of Idlib. 2 terrorist attacks target the building of the central bank and a security police patrol in Damascus. Terrorist gangs target the infrastructure and service institutions with attacks violating the Annan Plan. General Mood says the UN observers mission will work to apply the Annan Plan approved by Syria and submit neutral reports to the UN Security Council. And following the capture of a ship loaded with weapons for terrorists in Syria, Lebanese figures called for bringing smugglers of weapons and terrorists to account. Hello and welcome to News in English live on the Syrian TV. 2 suicide bombers blew themselves up in 2 booby-trapped cars in Idlib city this morning. The explosions led to the death of 9 citizens and law enforcement personnel, including 1 officer, and the wounding of nearly 100 people, mostly civilians. The explosions took place in crowded residential neighborhoods and caused great damage to the buildings, leaving 2 very large holes in the ground. 2 members of the international observers viewed the results of these explosions and the damage they have caused. And in violation of the Kofi Annan plan, the terrorist gangs escalated their crimes against the Syrian people and public and private property. An armed gang targeted the central bank of Damascus with an RPG missile. The attack led to some material damage. A terrorist gang targeted a patrol of the security police with an RPG rocket near Ibn al-Nafis hospital in Rukn al-Din neighborhood, wounding 4 policemen. The patrol clashed with the terrorists. In Hama, terrorist gangs attacked the security forces in the countryside. The security forces chased the terrorists to their hiding places, captured several of them, and confiscated large amounts of weapons, including machine guns, RPG rockets, explosive devices, large amounts of ammunition, and licensed car plates stolen from Homs, Aleppo, and Tartus cities. In an attempt to destroy the infrastructure in Syria and terrorize civilians, an armed terrorist group detonated 2 explosive devices on Ariha-Latakia highway. An armed gang targeted an oil pipeline of Al Furat Oil Company in the governorate of Deir el-Zor with an explosive device. The explosion led to the leakage of some oil. The company stopped pumping oil after the explosion. However, the production was not affected because the company has alternative pipelines that are used in such cases until the damaged line is repaired. On the eve of the arrival of General Robert Mood, the Lebanese authorities stopped a ship carrying tons of weapons to the armed terrorist groups in Syria, a flagrant violation of Mr. Annan's plan. The Lebanese authorities took the ship from Salata port to a Navy base in Beirut. The investigations disclosed that a warehouse was prepared in Tripoli to store the weapons and send them later to the terrorists in Syria. The Syrian Network for Human Rights has called on the international community, the UN Secretary General, and human rights organizations to denounce the attempts to escalate violence in Syria by smuggling weapons to the terrorist groups. The network said in a statement that violence has escalated in Syria with the arrival of the UN observers mission due to smuggling weapons and the infiltration of armed men from Lebanon, Turkey, and Libya to Syria. It also demanded taking the ship crew and those who were on board to the International Tribunal. Sheikh Ahmed Qabalan, the Grand Ja'fari Mufti in Lebanon, denounced smuggling weapons and armed men from Lebanon to Syria and called on the Lebanese army and the government to conduct a full and quick investigation to disclose the truth. For his part, Sheikh Hashim Minqara, head of the Council of Islamic Unity movement in Lebanon, described smuggling weapons to Syria as a dangerous act. An extremist terrorist gang calling itself Al-Nusra Front claimed responsibility for the terrorist explosion that took place in Al-Midan quarter last Friday. Its statement appeared on a website used by Al-Qaeda and said that the terrorist named Abu Omar al-Shami carried out this explosion. This front had claimed other suicide explosions, including 2 in Aleppo on February 12 and another in Damascus on the 6th of January.
Syria is facing the systematic terrorism, which features show the method of Al-Qaeda. The latest act of terrorism was the suicide explosion that hit the Midan quarter near the mosque of Zain al-Abidin. Al-Zawahiri, the first leader of Al-Qaeda, called upon his followers to continue their crimes against Syria. This terrorism is supported and financed by regional and Western countries in order to foil Annan's plan and to continue the plot against Syria. The West carried out many terrorist organizations carrying the slogan of Bush Jr., mainly, anybody who is not with us is against us. The West thus created Al-Qaeda in order to bleed the nations and control the world. Al-Qaeda has branches in Al-Maghrib, Arabia, Egypt, Iraq, and Greater Syria. The Iraqi branch claimed responsibility for the terrorist explosions that took place in Aleppo, which claimed the lives of 28 martyrs and wounded 235 other people last February. The chairman of the American Intelligence Committee told the Congressional Committee of the Armed Forces that Al-Qaeda branch in Iraq was involved in the suicide explosions that took place in Syria. The philosophy of Al-Qaeda is based on centralism, and the decisions are decentralized in implementation. America financed the Afghani Mujahideen and supported them with $600 million coming from Saudi Arabia and rich Saudis that are close to Osama bin Laden. The West, some Arabs, and Turkey support the armed terrorist groups in Syria, and they deny Syria's right to combat terrorism. The West waged many wars under the slogan and the pretext of combating terrorism.
Head of the UN Observers Mission in Syria, General Robert Mudd, has said that the UN expanded mission will be based on what has been done by the UN Advance Team.
In a press statement upon his arrival in Damascus yesterday, General Mudd added that the mission will work on implementing the UN envoy Kofi Annan's 6-point plan agreed on with Syria.
United Nations supervision mission in Syria is going to build on what the advance team has achieved, and we will work for the full implementation of Kofi Annan's 6-point plan as agreed by the government of the Syrian Arab Republic. To achieve this, now we have 30 observers on the ground. Within the coming days, we will double that number, and rapidly afterwards continue to the full manning of 300. And we look to engage with all stakeholders throughout the Syrian society to achieve this. Today, the United Nations Supervision Mission in Syria is established, and I was asked to lead that mission. So it is not complicated at all. It was an initial task to make the assessment that was completed. Then the advance team, upon the decision of the Security Council, was led at the proper level, and then you have the full mission with a 2-star general in charge. There will always be skepticism. There will always be someone who says this is not a good idea. But the point is that unarmed observers is a very strong tool if you have the commitment by those engaged in violence to stop it. I cannot make that choice for them. We cannot impose anything. But if we work together at the political level, the diplomatic level, and with the observers present on the ground, we can calm the situation and we can look for other political solutions.
The Committee of Political Parties held a meeting chaired by the Minister of Interior, General Muhammad al-Sha'ar, to discuss the documents of the Party of the Popular Will and the Party of the National Bloc. The documents were submitted for publication within the legal periods allowed for this purpose. The committee also met the founders of the Party of National Reform and discussed with them the documents of its foundation. It also discussed the documents of the Party of Al-Wa'd with its founders, including commitment to the democratic basis of its foundation, according to Article 1 of the Constitution of the Syrian Arab Republic. The committee also discussed some organizational affairs concerning the conferences of the new parties that were recently held. 9 parties have been granted license up till now. These parties are entitled to take part in the elections of the People's Assembly to be held on the 7th of May. Bahraini security forces arrested a 13-year-old minor under the pretext of gathering with the protesters. In a related context, the wife of Abdel Hadi al-Khawaja, the human rights activist who is on a hunger strike since last February, said that the Bahraini authorities forced her husband to eat after anestheticizing him against his will. Bahraini authorities have also banned the European parliamentarian Ana Gmez from entering its territory, despite her possession, of course, of a diplomatic passport in a new attempt to force a blackout over the repression carried out by the authorities against the Bahraini citizens. This brings our bulletin to a close. For more news, you can always log on to our website in English, syriaonline.sy. I'll leave you now with economy news and Khaled